Hey, I'm Lucy and I love Mass Effect. Now, recently I sat in on an hour-long presentation with BioWare about the upcoming Mass Effect remaster, and afterwards talked to key members of the dev team. You'll be pleased to hear I asked very nitpicky questions and have compiled all the big details I learned into this exhaustive list. If you like Mass Effect as much as I do, please consider subscribing. We have an exclusive interview with Mac Walters about the creation of Mass Effect 2's iconic suicide mission, and he even talks about some cut characters, so if you're a big fan like I am, you'll get a lot out of it. I'm not going to have a lot of footage of the actual Legendary Edition here, so I will mark when it is and isn't the Legendary Edition. Alright, let's kick off with the big stuff, gameplay changes to modernize Mass Effect 1. Let's start with combat. There's improved aim assist where the lock-on is a little bit stickier and you can now keep locked onto targets while you're strafing. There's finally a dedicated melee button, and yes, weapons have been balanced and tuned across the trilogy, but definitely more so in 1. A huge change in combat is that they've removed class-based weapon restrictions and aim penalties. That means you can't train in weapons your class isn't specialized in, but you can still use them without being penalized. What about that inventory system though? Well, it's still being worked on at the moment, but from the way they were talking about it, I wouldn't expect big sweeping changes. There is going to be a more unified control scheme across all 3 games though. You can still issue commands to your squad mates, and BioWare is improving those controls in Mass Effect 1 to be more in line with how they feel in Mass Effect 2. Squad AI is being improved, so if you send your squad mates over to cover, they will actually get in cover now. They're also improving enemy AI, so hopefully that means that now every time we come across Geth, we're not going to get completely rushed by them. The HUD now looks more modern, cleaner, and a bit smaller. It's not right on the edges of the screen anymore, it's a little bit further in. I did see some test footage where they were clearly toying with changing it to be more in line with Mass Effect 2 and 3, but they've dropped that. It's the same Mass Effect 1 HUD, just cleaner. Animations haven't been outright changed, but they have bug fixed a lot of them. So the example that BioWare gave was a lot of the times characters weren't necessarily looking exactly where they were supposed to, so they fixed that. Input camera and cover systems have also been smooth to try and eliminate some of that wonkiness you can get in Mass Effect 1. And speaking of wonkiness, the Mako has had a few touch-ups to make it easier to control, which I'm a little bit sad about because I love that awkward old thing, but I can see why a lot of people want it. There's a ton of other small changes that I absolutely won't have footage for, so I'm just gonna rattle through them quickfire style. In-scope aim smoothing, cover pass, rebalanced XP for the level 60 cap, which means that you don't have to do it in New Game Plus, a more consistent autosave, thank god, improvements to boss encounters, improved cooldown for first aid. Minigames are also being unified across all platforms. You might remember that console had a weird Simon Says thing and PC had a ring thing. That's going to be unified, but I'm not sure which one we're going to be getting just yet. They also said they're going to be decreasing the difficulty and frequency of those minigames. So fingers crossed they'll do the same for Mass Effect 2 for the safe opening and hacking stuff, because too much. Okay, that was a lot of gameplay changes for Mass Effect 1, so let's move to the rest of the trilogy, in particular story. Is there going to be additional story content added? No. The devs did look at what was on the cutting room floor, but unfortunately the stuff that was cut from the games couldn't easily be put back in for the remaster. They would need to have been built from scratch, so nothing new in the game. However, if you'd like a look at some of the stuff that did get cut, including never-before-seen characters, subscribe for our interview with Mac Walters. I've got 2 words for you: techno-hippie. Elephant in the room time. Which ending will you get? Well, upon finishing Mass Effect 3 in the Legendary Edition, you will be presented with the Extended Cut. Max said the Extended Cut provides a lot more context, and to him, is part of the canon. There's now a universal character creator across all 3 games, which means that customization options that were added in Mass Effect 2 and 3 are now available to you in Mass Effect 1. They've also added some new makeup, skin tones, and hairstyles, including more black hairstyles. There's also finally a unified female Commander Shepard across the trilogy. The FemShep design wasn't finalized until Mass Effect 3, so retroactively adding her back into Mass Effects 1 and 2 was one of the first things the team did when they approached the remaster. They adjusted her slightly, modifying that very powerful jawline and adding things like wrinkles and pores. Alright, the big techie one. How is this baby gonna look and run? Well, it'll be playable in 4K HDR at 60 frames per second if you're playing on PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, PS5, Xbox Series. On PC though, those frame rates will be unleashed. There'll be faster load times across all platforms. So what does that mean for our beloved elevators? Which is a weird sentence to say, but elevators are so big in Mass Effect. It means that they've actually added a button, so once the level has loaded in, you can press it and skip the elevator rides if you want to. But that music's so good, why would you? In terms of visual improvements, you name it, and there is a decent chance they've probably done it. For textures, they used an AI upres program to upscale texture resolution 4 times. That's across the board, but some textures even got improved up to 16 times. In Mass Effect 1 and 2, pretty much every character, armor, outfit, and weapon were hand-touched and up-resed. We got to see a bunch of them in the presentation, and a few that really stuck out to me were Zaid's face. Like, that man looked weathered. You could see every wrinkle, the eye bags were so defined. He looked like a different character. It was really cool. Thane as well, the scales on his head just looked really, really good. Another thing that they fixed that really stood out to me, even though it's so small, is they fixed eyelashes. So in particular, Ashley, girl, that clumpy mascara has gone. Like, it looks so much better. So when it comes to the actual levels themselves, everything was up-resed with the AI, and then the human artists went in and made subtle tweaks and changes to give all the levels a little bit more life. The dig site at Eden Prime, they moved the sun around, so you get the light coming through the trees. It looked really, really cool. Feros, for example, was so much more rich in detail. And Vermeer, all the water around there looked actually like water. It looked way more realistic, so I think they did a great job. If you want a full list of the tech stuff that they have gone in and tweaked and changed and maybe added to, then I've got you. They've made changes to tone mapping, anti-aliasing, volumetrics and fog, depth of field and bloom, bokeh depth of field, which they said was to enhance the Mass Effect art style, subsurface scattering on the skin, ambient occlusion, which was actually only on in very, very select scenes in Mass Effect 3. It's now present across the whole trilogy, and there's probably other stuff in that list that I didn't note down, forgot to mention, but they've made a lot of changes. There's a brand new launcher to start all 3 games from one place. At this screen, you can pick which game to play, watch the credits, switch your profile, and if you're playing on Xbox, even uninstall specific games. Not sure why you'd want to, but that's up to you. They do have the Genesis comic, so. When you finish one game, you get brought back to this screen, and then you select the next one. You don't just roll over into the next game. It's not one unified experience. The collection contains over 40 pieces of downloadable content, so that's story packs, armors, weapons, and alternate outfits. So yes, that does mean you've got the Dragon Age armor in there, as well as the Genesis comics. However, there's one piece of DLC missing, and that is Pinnacle Station from Mass Effect 1. Now, if you played Mass Effect 1 on PS3, you might remember that Pinnacle Station wasn't there, and it was actually because the source data was corrupted. I asked Mac about this, and it's the exact same reason here, unfortunately. Which might have consequences for achievements and trophies, but they weren't talking about that. Mass Effect 3 multiplayer didn't make it into the Legendary Edition. We knew that. However, according to project director Mac Walters, it was apparently on the table at the very beginning, but it would have been so difficult to implement. He actually likened the amount of effort it would take to put multiplayer in this collection to be on par with what it took to uplift the whole of Mass Effect 1. So it got cut. So how does Galactic Readiness work now? Well, it got rebalanced, and caveat, it's still being tweaked right now, but Mac was saying that it's much easier to get the best ending if you play through Mass Effect 1, 2, than 3. However, if you just play Mass Effect 3, you can still get the best ending, you just have to really max out everything. Still being tweaked. PC players are gonna get a couple of nice little additions, and you won't believe it. Controller support. Finally. No more mods. There'll be DirectX 11 support, 21.9 support, and like I mentioned earlier, an unleashed frame rate. There's no ray tracing in the Legendary Edition, but there are real-time reflections. So the quick explainer on this one is that Mass Effect Trilogy was made in Unreal Engine 3, and the effort that it would have taken to bring it into Unreal Engine 4 would have been way too much for this project, but what they can do now is they can leverage the more powerful consoles and PCs, and in each scene basically set up a second camera and render the sequence twice, and that's what they can use for the dynamic real-time reflections. Very cool. PS5 and Xbox Series stuff now. When we talked to BioWare, they didn't believe that there was going to be Tempest 3D audio support for PlayStation 5, but they did say improvements have been made at the asset level on sound effects. So in particular, they mentioned the weapons and guns and all those sound effects will have been improved at the asset level, not necessarily at the system support level. Also, kind of sad, but there is no special DualSense stuff. There isn't quick resume. There's also no photo mode, but they were saying what they were doing instead was leveraging the power of the new generation of consoles and PCs to make all those load times way, way, way faster. I wasn't lying when I said that would be an exhaustive list of everything in the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. If you love Mass Effect as much as I do, I know I've said it like twice now, but seriously, you do want to watch the interview with Mac Walters, so subscribe and stick around for that. I'm on Twitter at LucyJamesGames if you want to come talk about Garrus Vicarian with me, and if you don't, then I should go.